Hi, I'm Seamless. I'm gonna test the audio real quick. Cool. This is actually my second time trying to record this. The last one just crashed right in the middle of me doing it. Well, that's fine. This is a viewer track review because it's Wednesday. If you'd like to have one of your tracks featured in one of these videos, feel free to head on to the description of this video where you'll find a link to a Discord, wherein there is a channel that is labeled VTR with rules and such to help you do things like make sure that when I have a file, it has your name on it so that I know who it's for and that kind of stuff. But do that, and then it gets put in the list, and then I will randomly select the 7 that get played when the time comes, which is now, and we are beginning today with a track called Boing by Gatty. Let's have a go, huh? epic a little. So, this was a good concept overall, as the overall power presence and mix between the bits is different. Oh, well, it's different. That's an understatement. It needs to not be that different. It needs to sort of be related a bit more to this content. Like, and I have a bit of a suggestion with this, because the first time that I heard this part, it came into here, it wasn't as jarring as hearing it go back to that a second time. But the first time, I assumed that it was a bit, not necessarily a joke, but like you were attempting to make it sound like it was old. Like a kind of like older school, like radio-ish, sort of backgroundy, creepy, sort of old school recording-ish. And then put that into drum and bass. And that's cool. Great idea. And to that end, given how close it is to that, like, versus taking it the other way around, which is filling it way the hell up to make it kind of match presence with this, I would say that you should probably angle into the other direction to make it actually get more the way that it is. Actually make it more background, more in the back, like get other effects and stuff out here. You need more elements, really. Like this whole track has, this is a wonderful bass concept. This is a great sketch. And I commented on this sort of feeling in the last video when someone else had a song that was like, yes, this has all the necessary individual descriptive parts that add up to what this kind of track is, but it is not very artistically presented, mostly from the lack of sort of the detail on detail. And also in this case, the lack of a relationship of power between this section's feelings and these section's feelings. And also that stuff I said before about detail on detail can mostly just be described also temporally. Like, in that sense, what I mean by, like, the first time a thing happens is cool. The second time happens is the groove. The third time happens is repetitive. The fourth time it happens is boring. And to make this, you have to, like, we want to, like, elongate this experience. And this, with the way you do this is you chop up what counts as a repetition. Because if you do one thing one way once, second, and then one thing another way again, but you change it to second half, you've still done one thing twice, but you've done another one thing extra that turns the whole thing into a new kind of one. And that's what each section is, a sort of a new kind of one, where it is a collection of individual loops and such, but it is really just one set phrase. And that's what helps stuff like this elongate its groovage and legibility and temporal stuff. It's not as though the beat's bad. Like, it's not even really as though it needs to be more than this. The kind of, like, variations of fills I'm talking about are, like, have a little ticky-tappy random hats, change the beat a little, move one kick somewhere. Like, it's not even that deep. It's just that it has to have that kind of deference to the beat, but also deference to understanding that repetition can be as bad as it is good. Other than that, though, cool track is cool. It boings. Up next, we have Equinox by DeanReid. Apparently also a free download. It was for me. I can verify. All right. This track definitely had the detail on detail present, and a lot of it, in fact, and so much that this boy has mixing problems. Um, in particular, get a load of this sub nebula, especially out here. Wow, I was having a good fun looking at this. Oh, essay as I can't find the part. Ah, yeah, that's something. Um, not is I mean, if it's out here, not like all by itself or whatever, it's not that big a deal. But in particular, during the bits where there's drums, this can contribute to probably a sensation or an issue that you might be having, which is a difficulty in a particular kind of mix, and mostly by the just by the nature of the unstable nature of power. Um, I dig the guitar in here, which might be kind of a weird thing to bring up, right? Because that doesn't sound like the most realistic or well realized guitar sound, but like I've been there, I've tried that work, I've used that stuff, I've tried to make it sound better than that, and so I know the pain you're doing. I also know there's way better stuff out there for that kind of thing. But uh, I'm just saying, recognizing the struggle a little. And it also brings me back some memories of some stuff I used to do back in the day before I had a guitar or B sufficiently sophisticated libraries. Uh, I made stuff that didn't sound real but had texture that I had a hard time either replicating again or saying that was terribly bad in the first place or that I didn't necessarily nail on aesthetic. I have no idea if this did or not, like for you, but um, the the good thing about this is that at the time I knew that I was limited. I knew that I had a problem with mostly mixing and also the specific kinds of sound design. And if you think about it at this stage, both of those things are kind of the same thing. Like we get what like instrument wise, sound choice wise, we know what they are. We know what the things are going to go where they are to be how they are. But the problem is that we can make whatever kind of version of it we think we can by ourselves, but we don't know how to make the kind that can sit well with the other also the kind of mixing we want to do because there's a certain kind of expression of power that comes with running a certain kind of thing and do a thing in a certain kind of way, and if the thing isn't that thing it doesn't act that way and then there's a problem. And if you start to do things like clean this up too well, like maybe you've already tried this, maybe you've already done the thing which is to high pass all the stuff so that there's nothing down here but this little dippy low end of the kick and the one sub that you have replaced everything with, that is only these harmonics that are down here, and no other thing will have those and have that competition. And boy, will it ever clean up your mix. But what you might also will happen is that you lose the unpredictability and the power and the coolness of how every so often the power comes together. Every so often, parts of this definitely felt a way to you that was like, yeah, of course, this is exactly what I want, which is why you probably I'm projecting still. This is more memories of me. But basically, the idea is that like I would make tracks that I didn't necessarily understand why certain parts would work as well as they did, but I couldn't make the rest of the song work as well as those parts. And it was mostly due to the random nature of the material not being as clean as it was that every once in a while it just added up to being correct. But I never knew what the actual correct choice was. You study it well enough and you do some things, learn some stuff, and eventually you find out what that is. And the first couple steps are to do the high passing, and then and the reason why it's going to take it away is because whatever one thing is left at isn't going to be the way that it's supposed to, isn't going to be the one value that it actually is. So you have to find it. You got to get back in there and really start messing with levels. It's going to get hard, and it's going to be a difficult that you thought you were done with. To get this far without doing that, to have mixes as well as you have without these things, means that you've already learned quite a bit and suffered through a lot of stuff that you probably thought you were done with. But you're not about to be, because you're going to do this again once you separate subs and basically have to learn how to mix again, because now you're not dealing with unexpected power. Now you're dealing with actually the ability to make choices. And then you have to contend with actually choosing correctly instead of merely shaping your damage control, which is mostly what this track screams out to me as having done. Is that it's true that this may or may not have nailed whatever aesthetic you wanted to do, but you sort of knew what that was, or at least knew in what like caged direction that it was. And you also knew that while you might not have been able to generate the correct material, that you knew how incorrect. You know how exactly like where from how when, yes. You know where your A is, you know where your B is. It's just that the getting from A to B is a bit difficult. But because you know how, for well how know where, goddamn, because of how well you know where your B is, that's the thing to say. You can shave away the problems that you can with the tools that you have well enough that you're compensating for having not done some stuff. The thing you're compensating for in this case is that the just ever-living weird power in here. Because, yeah, if you compress hard enough and sidechain hard enough and slam hard enough, like all that stuff I used to do back in the day, all that old advice I used to give when I was the new in the YouTube scene, you can force it to compensate for a lot of things, but then that only gets you like 95% of the way there. The last 5% that makes a thing truly sound like an intentional piece of deal. Like a modern example of this I can call to mind right now still is the last thing Pendulum put out, called Driver, I think, or maybe just Drive. And it's the most solid example of loud mixing I've heard in a long time. And you can't really do that without having intentionally created the things that you are choosing to do that to. It's not experimentation at that point. And in certain ways it is, like within the field, like you're imagining that this is somewhat of a tremendous limitation, but within what you understand the limitation to be, there's plenty of expression. That's why there's not, well, I was about to say that's why there's not just one Pendulum song, but wow, did I walk into that joke? There is more than one Pendulum song, obviously, but you get my point, is that you can express quite a bit of variation within a field, as long as you know what the field is. And at the moment, you don't so much know what the field is. You are familiar with your sources. You're familiar with the stuff you can put together in such a way that you know how to shave it to be acceptable. And that is not the same. So you do got to get right back into like figuring out how, like, what the intentional choices feel like when now you're responsible for the cloud too. Because when you get rid of this, when you get rid of the nebula of your sub and its effect on everything, you're gonna have to replace its effect too. You're gonna have to replace the way that it weighted onto stuff with something else that does that, but without interacting with the sub. And there's a lot of questions there about the nature of what the feelings you're feeling and hearing really are, and like how you can even detect any of it. Because some of it's weird. Some of it's like some of this is like there's a rate of phase cancellation happening on something that is a rate, that is a frequency that is interfering with this, but it isn't showing up here. And I barely know how to deal with it other than just rampant trial and error. Other than know that it's not to do certain things too fast. But that's sort of why we separate stuff in the first place, is that we don't want cancellation to occur, and anything that's not just whatever your main tone is, anywhere near that frequency down there, is gonna cancel. It just you don't play subchords. Why not? Anyway, moving on, we have 260 Blood by Fyrebrand. 260 Blood. Not totally sure. Wow, that's some active summary happening. I mean, that's what cancellation looks like, but this appears to be intentional. I say so. I mean, alrighty, here we go. then it just ended like that. Wow. This is a good example of how well it works when you separate your subs like that. The smacking around this track does would be difficult to do if the sub wasn't separated around where it was. But also the track was kick-ass. Really good. Top to bottom. Smacked. Had sweet bass. Like I like when a track or an artist has a specific style of distortion and multiplying of harmonics. Like it's this track had a ringy tone and texture that was more than just the way it was EQ'd. It was also it was the way that the main sounds expressed themselves and where and how related they were. And it's nice when stuff feels and tastes well enough together like this that it feels like it was all one instrument, right? It could have been. It could not have been. Like getting there could either be doing that exact description, which is to just build an instrument that just comes out and sounds like this. Like nice, cool. It just has that much expression. I mean, it's awesome. That's what I try to do because that's how I assumed stuff was when I began trying to do things. And that's just therefore my way of doing. But a lot of the stuff that inspired me to do that was actually people who did stuff by making things highly individualized, but then were really good at shaping them in a way that made them feel like they were a singular source generation. Whatever, mixing, right? And that either way, like, because those are the ways to do that. You either do it separately and shape it together to feel like it was a thing, or you make it the thing and actually make a complicated, crazy generated source. And if I can't tell the difference, having done either, then you did the job. And the ultimate expression being that, like, also that stuff I said before about like repetition and variation and temporal detail on detail, like relating stuff like that sort of multiplies the content's value because because everything has its implicit association. That means the same two notes next to each other with a little bit of a change in them, just like it had a randomized phase start time, nice, and like so it reads as a different sound for a second. But its relationship with the other thing for being so close makes it still feel like it was that one thing. So now it's not like another thing, a 1-2. It's a 1-1-2. And that can be different than a 1-2. So you can that in our brains is the triggeration, sure, of repetition is elongated until we reach the stage of boredom. That's kind of what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to not so much make it feel like it doesn't repeat, because we want stuff to repeat. Like that's part of what people listen for in music. That was basically the first thing I learned about making music, and that the thought that like, yeah, there's a repetition that has to be there. Obviously you don't have the progressive stuff exists, but like the thought of it is like at the very least there's an oscillation, right? And it's not that we don't want a person to know that at large, but we also want them to feel like they don't get bored by it, essentially. And if you do just play the same thing a bunch of times, you're going to do that eventually. There's a limit on everything. And the question of how you can elongate your stuff is about, do you just have more stuff? Do you do more interesting things with the stuff you have? Do you have A part, B part, bridges? Blah. Different questions, different answers. And this is one really sophisticated answer to have essentially not all that much different about each individual thing, but just to have the slightest individual changes that elongate the content so much that, because remember the previous track looks kind of like this, right? It had stuff, beats, done. And this is the kind of the same description, but why does it feel fuller and dunner? And it's because it did everything I said the other track needed. It had detail on the outside, stuff just happening. And then it had also the temporal changes that were very minor adjustments. Tiny, like, individual kick changes. There's this one sound now. Like, it's very small one-hit times. But the main groove, largely unchanged the whole time. And then the outside bits do their deal. And that's the track. And the descriptive basis, it's hard not to just say this track and the previous track were the same. So, having met the same descriptive terms, those were the main differences that made this one feel like a realer thing than the other one. If that's how they struck you. A lot of projection in there, assuming people hear and feel things the same way I do. It's really hard to contend with that all the time, but it's a little bit the art, and I kind of like trying. Coming up next, we have The Chemist with Funkahol, which might be the best name I've ever heard. Factually. Like, You know that feeling you get when you hear or see or experience something that contends with the best ever of a particular category. It's not so much like a logical, like you just ran through the list and wow, that was better than everything. Like you're experiencing a magnitude, and you're sort of searching for a memory of the last time something magnituded that hard. And if you have a hard time finding one, the longer it takes you to find an example, the farther up the list the thing goes to register as the best as. And Funkahol, holy crap. I don't know that I have experienced a magnitude of damn since I heard that. I don't. I do not. If I have, it's been erased by this. Anyway, let's see how it sounds. Already in it. Okay, well, I ought to like that since I made a significant percentage of the sounds of this song. This is like a flip of funk fight, right? Was it funk fight or was it jazz fight? I don't, it was either funk or jazz. I forget which one I did first. It was the first one, I think. Like, this was funny for me just now because I didn't know that's what this was. And also, I don't totally, this isn't, I'm not going to be like, oh, this is a funk fight remix. Like, this is obviously not a remix. Like, you took this is so very different from that song. This is better than that song. Like, you put this stuff to way better use than I did in that track, in my opinion. So, good the hell job. But let's just go over my thought process for a second while I was hearing this. I'm thinking to myself, okay, holy crap, Funkahol. I'm just so enamored by this name. And I start listening to this song and I'm like, holy crap, this is starting to feel funky and neat. I hope this goes where I think it's going. Now that was the funniest thought I could possibly have had because it literally went everywhere I thought it was gonna go. And it took me kind of a second to realize why. Because not until I heard some of the main sounds was I actually full on, okay, all right, I hear it now. Like, right here. Around here, I'm starting to be like, okay, fade in the bass. Like, okay, I made these choices. I'm like, oh, you know, is this gonna go Cohen soundy? Like, oh man, I've tried doing that before and it's hard, but like, I like it when people do it. Like, people on this channel have pulled it off. Let's see what this is doing. And that happened, and I started to be like, wait, that's a choice. And then that one happened, and like, so now I'm trying not to be full of myself and be like, oh, because anything could have been that sound. I need most of these sounds, you know, quite around, and then, you know, out here is just like, he's using them over and over the place. Like this, the fade in with the material, it was really good. I mean, this track is excellent. Like, if I didn't make any of these sounds, I would just say this is a kick-ass track. Like, this is I don't even care that I made the sounds. Like, the arrangement of them, the mixing of all of this is an improvement on my version. And this is basically like I played a song and on a guitar, and you picked up my guitar and played a cooler song. Like, I don't have a real claim to this. I'm not going to say that I do. And I'm being kind of on the description of this, like a real descriptive of how I see this, because I'm pretty sure this person did this by acquiring the project file for this song that I had made that I put up to be purchased, basically explicitly so you could do this. And that, I just want to say, is A-okay in my book. It's pretty much the point. And like, where's some of those big fills? That one, that's pretty good. And most of these are better. Like the musical part and the progression especially are definitely way better than my version. Like, I was rushing that, like, when I was doing it, and I wasn't doing a very good job, in my opinion. Like, it would have taken, because I'm not now that good at it, and I was even worse back then. And it would have just taken a very long time to get into something even good and half the good it's feeling. Yeah, these guys. You can see some of the granulizing and sampling going on in there. But anyway, I'm done gushing on this track. Good job. Thanks, I guess, for putting the stuff to good use. It's neat that people still do that. Yeah. Funkahol lives on. Coming up next, we have Dystopia by Obskoflos. Yeah, that's Obskoflos. There's no other way to pronounce that. Right. I say, oh boy, I can't even make jokes about other alternative methods to pronounce that, so I would love to hear alternative pronunciations of Obskoflos. Look how it's spelled in the description. All right. So I assume this is the track for which this guitar solo was done by Shiho Tori, who is another person who has had a track featured once or twice on the View Track Reviews. So how cool is that? This is neat. And boy, does it ever exemplify just how difficult it is to merge electronic stuff with metal stuff. So let's talk. Right here is the whole problem. This is how metal sounds. The snare's also just a little bit like cracking. That is I don't know what about that attack is just that is a lot. I guess it's because it's peaking a little too hard and a little too long. Maybe shorten how hard that long that peak is. I don't know. It probably sounds better when it's layered in with. Are you even using it in here? Oh, maybe you're not. But point is that this is what electronic stuff sounds like. Yeah. Now, sound design wise, given the fact that both of these sections are correct, what is it about this that's a problem? And the first instinct is just go right here and be like, yeah, okay, that guitar is it's just too dark. But yeah, if you haven't tried doing this, what will happen when you do that? Because there's content up here, and you can just jank it, jank it right up. And if you do that, it'll work. It'll make the guitar sound nice and kind of papery. It'll have a nice high frequency up there. But the thing about a guitar signal up there is that it's noise. It doesn't have the solidity that a synthetic sound does. And this sound goes a nice long way to getting there vis-a-vis being like that, like a guitar, which is the plan. When you're doing this electronic metal hybrid, is that you want to make the content that by its nature fits with the envelope that you want your main feel to be. And on one hand, the kind of contrast that goes straight into here is interesting. On the other hand, you're like almost like, I don't know, prepping the contrast by how harsh the highs are on the EDM stuff versus how they're not in the metal stuff. And the way that I recommend handling this is to kind of get familiar with the interaction of the higher frequencies, not just in literal level, because sure, there's the visual discrepancy, and you just do. Because you can either jump this up and match, or you can bring this down. But the problem with bringing this down is the same problem with bringing this up, is that it's not the nature of those sounds to sound that way. So it sounds wrong to us. It's essentially uncanny valley for that. Now, we're trying to make a hybrid. We're trying to kind of merge the feelings a little, and writing-wise, it's usually you just do it like this. You just make them separate parts so that they are tremendously an issue for the most part, and that their difference is special and unique, and it's cool, and that's great. But if you actually wanted to merge them, if you wanted it to be a main bit, like, say, anything McGordon has done, then the way that kind of stuff works is that you layer the synthetic stuff with the guitars, like 1-to-1. And on top of this, there's a real specific strategy. The idea is that it isn't just that you want this high end to be synthetic over the guitar, is that you want to represent the way that these guys are, the way that they are the same to each other. That's a hard thing to say out loud and mean in a way that I have faith makes sense. So was that for that matter. Jeez. The whole point is that there is a nature of these two sounds types places that is similar, but it's not in frequency. It's in a kind of motion presence. And that exists, the motion exists in these frequencies of here, but it's the result of these things that creates the higher frequency envelope that's the rest of the tone. But if we can merge the two of them enough that particular reality is accentuated, then the differences elsewhere are just that. They're just textural differences. Now, because there's this main element, that's the main element, and instead of just the weight up here. And then you can fill it in with white noise and drums and other elements and arps and stuff. But the plan, though, is that when you're merging it through, the particular frequencies you need to overlap are the ones that are kind of on the lip of where the guitar ends. But you don't want it to necessarily overshadow the guitar. You want it to sound like the guitar has like a meaner edge than it necessarily possibly can. And that edge is the fact that a synthetic waveform's generation is an oscillation that you can control. Like, it's a repeated regular thing instead of an expressed slewed tone because it's a string. Like we're trying to get this motion profile as much up in here as we can, but we still want it to be this, and we still want it to come out like that. And the thing is that like the nature of these things being this definitive is mostly about a presence in the higher frequencies, and that in terms of pressure and power. And it's one of those like uncanny valley things that if that starts to happen, then, or rather is not there for here, then it feels weird. But over here in over here land, this is still happening. This is still in there. It's just not together enough or related to higher frequencies in the same way enough that the higher frequencies are related in the same way enough, which means that you can do the both of which of these that feel right in the sandwich, as long as it's the replacing the correct frequency presence in here in the sandwich, that when they are played separately, they feel as though they're related more than this does. That was a really long description to solve not even what wasn't that much of a problem, because this track was awesome. It kicked good the pretty much the whole way through. The presence was right. I definitely was kind of about one of these notes, but that might have been the point. And I'm not a huge amount of complaints. And honestly, this wasn't probably even your goal at all to even go that far and quote unquote merging sections. But I just like talking about that whenever metal and EDM show up in the same song together. So that's why that talk happened. Coming on next, we have Finding Meaning with Initiate. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Cool. Look at all that dynamic. Let's see what this is like. Beep, 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 beep. Good old that. All right. Excellent. All the way through. This had the best vibe. It did. The whole time. And not only did it have the best vibe, it had the best possible B part. Like, this is how you do. This is how you elongate content. Wow, this is the theme for today's VTR, I guess, is how you establish a groove or theme, motif, whatever, and how do you get a song length of stuff out of it without like necessarily doing the progressive thing, which is that you just keep adding more things where you go, I have this thing, but doing it too much sucks, so I'm going to do a whole ass other thing and then go back to that thing. That's not quite the same as taking the one thing and turning it into something like that's repeatable the whole way through. And something like that is a little bit more like this. Like the thing in this track is a little bit easier to see outside of this. It's like the whole sort of motion of it all. Like that's the track. And it right up until you get essentially every version of that. Like this is, you get the built up it, the hit it, the subtle, the hit it, and like the hitter, and now we get the B part. That is exactly what you do. This is a rhythm and a little bit of a timing switch up, but like the notes are still the same. The progression is basically, the timing is really just on, and that's the only thing that switched, and it made it better. And cool, now you get to do the same thing for longer. It feels a bit different. It does have like a little bit of an extra difference due to like just the way that the movement is, but that's the whole point. Is that difference doesn't have to be total. It don't have to change like that which was cool about what you were doing was everything about the thing, but it doesn't mean that in order to do the variation of it, you have to change everything about it. You're also capable of changing not that much about it and building up over time a long-term expression of what is really just one idea. And that's like really cool when it works out. And this worked out. It did. Like on top of like I mentioned it's looking dynamic, and it's not necessarily crapshoot, but it's a gamble on how or what is going to come out of a track that looks like it has dynamics. Because sometimes it's because I just got sent an unmastered mix, and other times it's because of this, that someone actually had a desired presence to paint out in a thought, and it felt like it matched it. Like this doesn't feel like a thing that was striving for something that it settled for, which is sometimes a feeling you get when you have tracks that knew they wanted to be louder but couldn't really contend with being louder for one reason or another. One reason or another. The reasons are multiple, and this track contended with none of them because it was where it wanted to be at the amount of it that felt right. Like, I mean, I like things that can go harder and all that, but this is extremely well capped. Let's put it that way. Yeah. I think that's it. Nope, it's not. We have one more track. We have Focus by N.A.T. Wow, here's some loudness. I am excited about this. All right. Here we go.
Focus.
Focus. All right. Well, nice. All the way through. N.A.T here is a student of mine, and I am pleased to see this not clip. Look how right up to the edge it gets, and it just doesn't. I'm not reading it on anything. Good job. It was loud, and it didn't clip, and it felt right. It was smooth. The texture that was there, the detail on detail was there. Like, look at that. Doesn't that look busy? Like that, but it didn't feel busy, did it? Did it really ever feel overwhelming? Ever? This is such a good thing. And also a nice example of kind of utilizing both the things we were describing in the previous track about like methods elongating content, like the one option being like making really good use of your minor minuscule stuff, or having a kind of progressive value where you're just going somewhere else. And this had kind of both, didn't it? Like you can sort of see the phases of it, and that, like, this is a nice example of like there's middle ground. You don't have to go full prog. You don't have to go full middle, minimal. Wow. Fully tried to say that like 5 times. But you don't gotta do that. You can go in the middle. The middle. That's the word I was trying to say, rather than I was being forced to say. This is a good example of doing a bit of both, where the main content got to have its minor variation that made it live. You can sort of see it happening from up here. And then you also get the prog versions where because you're not, like, the value of having the progressive stuff in there with the minor adjustments is that you actually get to do denser adjustments. One danger of doing too much with your variations is that they themselves become parts where, like, the one thing is as it is because it's so repetitive and obvious and special in its way that you could recognize it as it every time it happens. And if a variation happens too often, that frequently, then there'll be a lot more it, and it'll essentially burn through what this is faster to the boring point. And that's a problem when there's not a lot you can do with the thing. Like, this honestly, you probably could have done more of this. You probably could have made it busier. I think everything could be busier, but you know, but because we go to other places, this means that we don't have to fear burning out on it because we are going to go somewhere else, and that means we actually can strategically deplete our variation reservoir. What the hell was I talking about? But that's what I meant. that definitely made sense. I don't know why I went there with it, but it did. But yeah, overall, kick ass. Like, the sub was on, the notes were all hit. Like, everything is just so good. Like, the fit on this is top notch. Pretty much everything I just said about all the other stuff is pretty well opinionated too, right? Like, it's you do you when you can make a thing sound this good. Yeah, your choices get to be okay. You get to think you're doing good and agree with yourself and be right. And not because I taught this person how to do this, by the way. They were already this good. Anyway, that's it for today. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And as usual, please have a nice day.